Am I muted now? No, I'm not muted now. I see the levels. Thank you, ZZZZZ. Nice. I appreciate it. So listen, here's what's going to happen. We're going to just treat this like a podcast. We're going to do a live version of the podcast, and we're just going to run from there because why not? And we're just going to treat it like a podcast. So Chelsea women played Arsenal today, and I want to talk about the women's team more because they're fun, man. They have such good players. Myra Ramirez is like electric to watch. And I think there's like a real dearth of women's stats content. Like I don't think people are talking about it that much. Like at ASA, we have the NWSL, and there's the Expected Own Goals podcast, which is kind of on our feed with Evan and Eric, who are like, if you are into NWSL, you should totally listen, but it's very American leaning, and it's like super high quality content, but there's not a lot of that women's stats content out there. And I think it's cool to talk about this team because this team is good, man. Not that they played very well today, but I think this team is good. And Chelsea go into the Emirates today, win 2-1. First time they've won at the Emirates. Emma Hayes could never win at the Emirates, despite some much better performances than this. And what's really special about today is that, like, the way the FAWSL is set up is you only play 22 league games. You play all 11 other teams twice, home and away. But only 3 teams can win the league. Chelsea, City, and Arsenal. Nobody else has a realistic chance to win the league. And what that means is that when you play these teams, picking up points in those games are crucial. So for Chelsea, like I said this the opening day of the season. So the opening day of the season, Manchester City and Arsenal draw, right? The opening day of the season, they draw. Those 2 dropped points hand Chelsea like a huge title probability. Like if we look at last year's title, like if I look at the table, Chelsea dropped 11 points the entire season to win the league on goal difference. The season before that, if I go even one further, I think they dropped even less. Yeah, the season before that, they dropped 8 points the whole season. So, like, every time you get to take points off an opponent, so, like, Chelsea take 3 points off Arsenal today. Arsenal have now dropped 7 for the season. Like, Arsenal probably won't win the title now. Like, their season is almost assuredly over in terms of winning the title. And for Chelsea, being 2 points up on City already really matters because City look amazing. They destroyed Barca midweek. Huge test between these two. And Chelsea have looked not great. So if we look at today, like Chelsea played a 4-3-3. I'll get into the tactical board in a second. But like, I think Chelsea did not play well. Their goals are like kind of a freakish goal off of a set piece. Myra Ramirez scores like a flick back over her head, which goes really, really well. And then there's a really lovely combination out wide between Myra and Lauren James for a back post delivery for Sandy Baltimore to arrive at the back post, who was really critical in what Chelsea wanted to do today. And I'll talk about that. But from a stats perspective, like this was not a strong Chelsea performance. You're outshot 20-11, 4 big chances to 3. And one of those big chances is Aggie Beaver-Jones at the end getting a big transition where like Arsenal missed like 2 free volleys, like 5 to 7 yards out in the middle of the box on set pieces. You have their goal. You have like just not a great performance from Chelsea. I did not think they did very well, especially defensively. I thought they had a couple high turnovers, but it wasn't anything super great. And they really struggled to play through with ideas that weren't just kick it long to Myra and hold it up, which for long watchers of CFCW, like that's how Chelsea played with Sam Kerr, right? Like is kick it long, Sam Kerr holds it up, brings people in, and then you go from there. 46 box touches to 19, like it's hard to live like that in big games all the time, but the Emirates is a hard place to play. So like I'm not getting too up in arms about it. FotMob has Millie Bright as player of the match. Sam, CFC Central, flagged this up as well, that she had like 14 defensive actions or something like that by the 80th minute. Like, just a huge defensive performance from her and Kadisha Buchanan, who I thought were both really good. Both really good. On the flip side, I thought Lucy Bronze was really poor defensively. And that's like very evidenced in the goal where she gets rinsed 1v1 and then Hannah Hampton gets beaten from not a great angle. But I thought Chelsea did a pretty good job once they decided to shut the game down, but the defensive set pieces were really a problem the whole game. But that's kind of the shape of the stats. The annoying thing about the FAWSL is we have to wait for the data to come out because FOTMob doesn't have the XG stuff. So we'll see. But if we look at the tactical board, there's like a couple cool things to talk about. So nominally, Chelsea are playing a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, kind of depending how you look at it. But really, it's more like a 4-2-3-1. You have Hannah Hampton in goal, Lucy Bronze right back, Sandy Baltimore left back, Buchanan and Bright as center backs. Wika Kaptein, who has been so impressive as a very young defensive midfielder. I thought she looked great in preseason. I thought she's looked very good so far in the league games. Sioka Nuskin next to her. Lauren James is the 10, Cameron on the right, Wrighton on the left, Ramirez is the 9. And what we've seen is like, I always like kind of comparing the men's teams and the women's teams at the same club, because it's like, do you really have a club ethos? Like, does that really stick for you? Or are you just about it? And it's kind of funny because we've seen them end up in 3-box-3 the exact same way as the men's team, just doing it with Baltimore joining from left back and Wrighton goes inside as a 10. And Chelsea got some joy out of this, right? Like the second goal is like the ball ends up wide with Canarid, and we end up with like Ramirez here and James here, and it sucks so many Arsenal players over that Baltimore is able to arrive at the back post. And there were a few moments where she was able to arrive at the back post and get joy out of it. But really, like, Chelsea struggled to build. They built in a 4-2 today, so they would start 4-2, but asymmetric. So, like, your fullbacks are not the same height. Nuskin would come low, and Wrighton is kind of working this one. And they had a very hard time because when the ball would go wide, Arsenal would just lock, right? So a lot of times you'll hear coaches talk about locks. So a lock is like, if Lucy Bronze can connect through a player to the other side of the pitch, you need someone to lock them. So whether that's like the 6 gets picked up, you have to lock them. The center back gets picked up, you have to lock them. The weak side 6 gets picked up, you have to lock them. But Eidevall's locks were really good. Eidevall got a lot of stick and has been getting a lot of stick for Arsenal. I think he's just like a totally fine and good coach. Like their ideas against Chelsea are good every single time. I bet you if you look at like the historical spread of XG performances versus results in Chelsea Arsenal games, it would be hilarious. Like, he would be super unlucky. But I thought the press was really good, and what ended up happening a lot of times is you'd end up in this situation where the only pass is to play Canarid and like up the line, or play Wrighton up the line, and like you don't have many options. And what Chelsea did sometimes well was they would bring this action to then play direct into Myra, and then you get like spins off of it and movements off of it because she's just such a physical mismatch for any center back. And that was kind of what the game came down to. It was like, how many times can you manufacture this situation? Once she goes off, Chelsea got nothing. Like, Aggie is a very useful and talented player, but that's not her game. But I thought Arsenal's press was really good, and I don't think Chelsea did a great job breaking them down to get really high-quality chances out of it, especially in the second half. And on the flip side of that, Arsenal built in a... that's my right back. I don't know why that went there. Arsenal built 4-2, and Chelsea pressed 4-4-2, which has been kind of how Chelsea have played defensively under Emma for a long time, and under Sonia Ben-Pastor. What I thought was interesting was that the weak side winger was doing a lot of covering sometimes, and it was very it was almost man-marky. It was almost man-marky. Like, there were a lot of times where Chelsea would end up like this. Like this. But then the fullback would come and Cannarin would follow, and you'd end up like this almost. Kind of managing the distances here, like if the right center back has the ball. But also, we saw sometimes like they would bring the third player down, Cannarin would stay, and you'd end up with this. And Nuskin is free and Kaptein is here. And Arsenal are trying to play big switches like this. And Chelsea had a lot of trouble on the switch when the winger would come inside. Like we saw so many times in the second half where Guro Reiten is trying to cut the line. And because she's coming from inside, they just get passed around and Arsenal are able to go forward. I thought Sandy Baltimore dealt with like the 2v1s and stuff quite well. But I don't think Chelsea did a great job in the press today, either creating really high quality chances out of it that you're okay with how much you get played through because you get really good turnovers, or in how they got or actually denying the forward progress. So that's kind of my takes on the game. I think it's really hard to judge Chelsea because this 11, while very talented, is missing like 4 starters, right? Like, you don't have Niamh Charles, who's a guaranteed starter. You don't have Aaron Cuthbert, who's coming back from injury, who's a guaranteed starter. I think Ashley Lawrence is probably better than Lucy Bronze. I think Kat Mack is useful, maybe not a starter for this team. And then you have like Sam Kerr is still injured. Like, that's another one, is how do you get Myra and Sam Kerr into the same team? That's a really difficult. It's not really difficult. They're amazing. Just play them together. But how you play them together, I think there's some not consternation, but you have to think about it. It's not easy unless you actually want to play 2 strikers, which maybe we do. But I think that's where I'm at just for this game. I think it would be cool to kind of take a look at where Chelsea are for the season, because I think people would be a little bit surprised. Chelsea are top of the table, pending the later WSL results today. So that will probably not be true by the time this comes out as a pod. And they have not been great. So 2.7 XGD in the league is second highest behind Man City, who have played an extra game. Chelsea's game against Manchester United last weekend was postponed because they had to play Real Madrid on Tuesday, and they didn't want to play Sunday, Tuesday, and the league couldn't fix their schedule for reasons that aren't exactly clear to me. However, there's some caveats here. Chelsea played Villa basically even and only won 1-0 at home, which is not a great result against a good but not amazing Villa team. They won 7-0 versus Palace. Palace are newly promoted, but 3-0 XG is like not a great XG win for Chelsea. Like, if we look at last year's match logs versus like the very worst teams, right? Like 6-0 versus Villa in a pumping. 8-0 versus Bristol City, lots of XG here. 6-0 versus United, 4-0 versus Leicester. This is kind of similar to that one, like the Leicester result. But Leicester are not terrible. It's just not a great it's not a great performance. And really, it was only the second half. The first half was very poor. And then they beat Madrid 3-2 midweek, and there's some game state stuff here. Like, they were up very early, and they're up for like the whole game, and so they're kind of whatever about it. And you have Arsenal coming up, so like, where are people's heads? But like, this is not a great performance either. Against the not, Madrid are good. There's lots of talent in that team, but they're hardly world beaters. So I'm a little concerned. I thought preseason looked so good. So maybe just my expectations were too high. Chelsea have historically been very slow starters. Like, if we go look at last season again, like the first 6 games, they go 5 wins, 1 draw, but like there's really only like one good performance in here, and it's the City game that they draw. So it's hard to be. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But that's gonna wrap up the podcast portion. I'm gonna stick on stream for a little bit because you've got here. But that's it for the podcast. Thank you all for listening. If you like the pod, share it, subscribe, whatever you want to do. And as always, enjoy the soccer. Podcast is over. Stream. Now we can talk about whatever we want. We can talk about the women's team. We can talk about the men's team. We can talk about whatever we want. There's only 5 of you. Akshay, I see you, man. You're in all the streams. I love it. And so are you. ZZZ, I see you all the time, too. Waiting for the Tyreek George video. It might be tomorrow. It might not be. I have, like, real-life stuff going on this weekend. I have the clips cut. I just got to go through it all. But I got to do that at some point. But it's coming. I promise. I promise. I'm very curious to see what Chelsea do versus Liverpool. And I thought Levi Colwill looked really good. I've also heard this is the stream special for like the 6 people that are here. Reece James like maybe available for selection in the Liverpool game. We'll see. Might be available for selection. What I've heard. We'll see. But yeah, man. I thought England looked terrible. That's the fun one. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at. That was Chelsea. All right, we're gonna cut it short. I don't have much else to say. I wanted to talk about the women's team because that was a fun game, and winning away at the Emirates is always fun. So we'll just cut it there. Alrighty, thanks everybody for hopping on, and I'll see you all after